guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Gentlemen, welcome to a Statements Monday here on Mackey and Judd. It's been a while since the three of us anyways, talked Timberwolves. I feel like we've been so immersed in Vikingsville, and the Twins have made some moves, and you guys got Judd's hockey show. So my Timberwolves outlet twice a week is Flagrant Howls with Kyle Theige, and that's been great. So if we could, I'd love to start you guys off with a Timberwolves-related statement here.
Let's do it.
Okay? All right. People wrote the Timberwolves off way too early. And I definitely was sort of on the ropes myself watching this thing play out. And they're not through the woods yet. And this whole Karl Anthony Towns situation has become a little bit of a mystery. He's no longer like watching games on the bench. But he was watching the Eagles yesterday in a walking boot. So he has made it known the last couple weeks. He wants people to know that like he definitely is still injured, showing a picture of the walking boot and whatnot. So that whole thing aside, as we sit here this morning on Monday, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the 5th seed in the Western Conference, a half game back of the Clippers for the 4 seed, 2 games back of the Kings, who they play, is it tonight, I believe?
Yep, back-to-back.
Back-to-back for the 3 seed in the Western Conference. And the 2 teams above them, the Nuggets are the 1 seed and the Grizzlies are the 2 seed. Those are teams that the Wolves beat, not regularly, but like about half the time it feels like. So not only are people writing off the Wolves way too early after kind of a weird start trying to figure out this Gobert situation, the Wolves can actually do some damage if they get in against any of these teams that they would face. There is no team that I would look at and say, oh, they're screwed if they have to match up with the Kings in the first round or the Grizzlies again, who they should have beat last year, if not for a couple clunkers and a 26-point blown lead. So the bandwagon is still open if you gentlemen would like to come on the bus here.
So I went on Friday against the Grizzlies again, too. And I will say this. I've seen them play the Grizzlies twice here, and they beat them both times. They match up now so well against that team. And I know playoffs can be different for sure. But when you watch them, I mean, the Grizzlies struggle as much against the Wolves as the Wolves do against bad teams like the Rockets and Pistons. It's a very weird thing. But you know what's funny is the expectations were so high for this team that their start was seen as a disaster. And it didn't help, again, to reference the point that they lost to some really bad teams, which makes it seem like 2 or 3 defeats in one night. But the Western Conference, in both the Wild's case and the Wolves' case, is so tight, and the playoff spots are so clumped together that, they're actually in good shape. Now, there's questions about when guys start to come back. You know, let's say Cat comes back. Not, oh my God, he's back, that's going to suck, but how does it work? Like, it feels like, in watching them on Friday, it feels like they have finally started to figure out a chemistry, too. Because this team was, the one thing I'll give them last season is it, for the most part, always felt like that was a pretty tight team, right? Like Pat Bev was a galvanizing guy. He was the heart and soul. And they definitely missed Pat Bev at the start of the season. But, you know, Gobert, I think the expectation now, in retrospect, was, okay, Gobert, it cost a ton, and we gave up a ton for him. So he should come in and just be a star. Watching him play, he's really not that. Like, he does certain jobs well, but like just this notion of that he was going to pay that trade-off immediately was probably flawed. And so watching them on Friday, it just feels like the pieces of the puzzle now are starting to fit. That's led by Ant. But there was a lot of things that I saw on Friday that were a marked difference as far as the mentality and probably the calmness if things did start to go bad, that 2 months ago, this club completely lacked. And now it's starting to stabilize, and you can sort of see it.
Well, I think if and when, and I say if at this point, because, I mean, there's no timetable for Cat's return. So I don't know if it's like a March thing. I would think that he's going to be back at least for like the last few weeks of the season. But what they have now with Kyle Anderson in the starting lineup, Kyle Anderson's just the ultimate Swiss Army knife player. On any given night, he can run point guard for you. He can play the 4. He can grab some rebounds. He can knock down threes. He's a great passer. Like, he's just this incredible glue player for the Wolves. And his chemistry with Gobert is off the charts right now.
Yeah, it was great.
So you've got to keep those guys paired up. Even if you move him out of the starting lineup when Cat comes back, I think you find a way to, like, maybe you sit Cat after the first 6 minutes, bring Kyle Anderson in the game. So there's going to be some dynamics to figure out. But the way that things are going, they have one of the best records in the NBA in the year 2020. They're like 11-4 or something since the New Year's Eve players only meeting, the Come to Jesus meeting. They were 16-21 after losing that game to the Pistons on New Year's Eve, and they've been one of the best teams in the NBA since. Can you add in at some point the greatest shooting big man of all time who can also pass and rebound and do these things in a supplementary, complementary way, instead of having him be the whole focal point again and having to shake everything up? That's the biggest question down the stretch here. But and by the way, and we'll get, I know you guys will probably bring up an Ant statement here, but Anthony Edwards, basically since the All-Star starter list came out, or when it became obvious that, like, he wasn't going to be an All-Star starter, he has clearly made a case to be among the reserves. He's averaging like 35 points over his last 5 or 6 games, and shooting like 60% from 3 or something over that stretch. So this truly has become Anthony Edwards' team, if you will. Even like hopping on the microphone, Gobert's doing the in-arena post-game, and he's not like a super high-energy guy, and he's kind of, he's answering the questions, and Ant comes over and gets the crowd to chant, Rudy, Rudy. Like, his leadership instincts, too, are incredible. So it's been fun. They definitely buzzkilled everyone at the beginning of the season, but there's 2 or 3 months left here in the regular season. They will get into the playoffs or the play-in, and they can pretty much beat anyone in the Western Conference. So we'll see. I think everything that you set out to accomplish is still in front of you. If your goal was go win a first-round playoff series, like, that is still very much in front of you if you are the Timberwolves.
My statement is this: follow Ant's lead. And now I know that that's hard because he's a great player, and you're saying, how can he follow? Okay, there's one thing. There's a starting point that I want to talk about with this kid that I think is incredibly important. I got pushback on a tweet I put out Saturday, I think it was, about, and I pointed to the NBA and baseball. Load management. Got to give guys rest days, okay? Got to give guys rest days. Well, playing in games is not a talent thing. It's an availability, and it's being deemed to be durable enough. Ant has dealt with a bruised hip since early January, and he showed up on the injury report before the game on Saturday against the Kings that the Wolves won with a wrist problem. He has started every game this season.
Yeah.
They gave him, I think, opportunities to not play. And you know what he said? My team needs me. You know what? He's right. Like, we have become so used to, well, of course this guy didn't play. It's load management. And in some cases, with a few very fragile humans, that's probably fine. But the majority of these guys travel not commercially, but they travel first class because the plane is chartered. Athletes have never been more taken care of. And Ant says, you know what? I am a star. And because I'm a star, I'm needed. And he is available for every game. He plays hurt. And more importantly, Phil just went through a litany of the fact that, like, in the last 5 games, 34.2 points per game, 54% from 3-point range. So you know what's not hurting Ant? Playing a lot. He's thriving. Everything this guy does to me on the floor, I know there have been some, or I know that there was an off-the-court issue in the offseason. Everything this guy does on the floor, though, to me, is what I would want from a teammate. It's basically, especially in this era. And, for all we debate about, okay, is this Ant's team? What's Gobert's role? What's Ant's role? You know what the number one thing, in my opinion, that makes it your team? When you're playing with your teammates, when you're making yourself available, yes. When you have a relationship where you can call your coach Finchy and basically say, he yells at me all the time. I love it. Finchie's my guy. Like, look at the things that Anthony Edwards does for this team, not just from a scoring standpoint and not from just a playing standpoint, but look at what he brings. And that is the definition. You know what's not your team? When you whine at officials constantly. And Ant whines a little bit too much at times, but when your body language says, woe is me, then it's not your team. When it is your team is when you make yourself available to play in a league where the majority of majority might be too strong. A lot of superstars don't make themselves available because they are load management days.
I just love that he's figuring the whole thing out. He could be accused maybe the first couple of years of being sort of an aloof chucker on offense, where he just was just sort of taking shots when he wanted to, and everything seems like it's in a state of basketball flow now. And maybe handling the ball more often has helped him with this. But even when he's playing off the ball, it just seems like he's active. He knows how to make plays when he's double or triple teamed as well now, because now you're seeing like opposing defenses, when he's hot, will just trap him in the half court. And it's up to him to figure out, okay, what's the next pass? How do we open something up for somebody else? So his playmaking ability is the thing that's really stood out to me over the past. So another thing to look at too is since Karl Anthony Towns went down, and it was, you're looking around the room and it's like, all right, well, who's going to step up? This is a super high usage centerpiece of the team is gone now. And Anthony Edwards, since that period, his rebounding is up, his assists are up, his scoring is up. So it's been a 31-game sample in Cat's absence. And this is where Ant has really stepped up and has said, all right, I will fill whatever void is left here. And they went through a couple rough patches like the end of December where they lost a bunch of games. But overall, he's now averaging 26 points since that Washington game, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, a block, 47% field goal percentage, 40% from 3. It's just, he's becoming this unstoppable force, this player that you all hoped he would be when he was drafted number 1 overall. It's a blast to watch. Declan.
My next statement. They know how to win. So we just talked about how the Wolves are playing some of their best basketball since the new year and the players-only meeting. And previously, the Wolves have always struggled with Karl Anthony Towns out of the lineup. So the previous 3 seasons combined, when Cat did not play, the Wolves went 15-44. Awful. Terrible. That is some old mid 2000s, 2010, 2011, 12 Wolves basketball that looked pretty brutal, right? Yeah. But without Cat, they weren't good. This year, they're 17-14. Yeah. They have turned things over. They have figured out ways to win without the best big man, one of the best shooting big men in the NBA. And I'm curious of how he is going to fit in here. Yes, he's wildly talented and should be the best player on this team. But this team is starting to gel now and figuring out ways to win without him, and how he slides in here and with the whole chemistry of the thing. I think when he comes back, the Wolves will still be in the similar spot they're in right now, which is fighting for one of these top 6 seeds. At the very worst, they're in the play-in again. But I'm very curious how this team wins with Cat when he returns, because previously they couldn't, and now they're starting to do it a little bit.
This is honestly the best possible thing that could have happened. This is kind of what, when the injury happened, I don't think anyone was like happy that he got hurt, but I remember us having a conversation on this show that said, okay, this thing's been kind of a discombobulated mess so far. Anthony Edwards feels like he's just kind of standing off to the side for half the games. D'Lo doesn't really know how he fits. And I got a D'Lo statement for you guys in a second. And so it was almost like pulling Karl Anthony Towns out of the equation for a while allowed other guys to figure out how they fit with Rudy. Kyle Anderson figured out, oh, this is how I play with Rudy. You've seen D'Lo getting more lobs to Rudy now. It almost just like made other guys figure out relationships with each other. And it allowed Anthony Edwards, like we talked about, to really rise up and be the guy that this thing is centered around.
Right.
And this is a huge if, but if Cat can come in here, when Kevin Love had to be traded, there was no way where you could just be like, all right, Kevin, I know you're frustrated. You're just not like the A guy on a winning team. You need to be like the B or the C guy. That's offensive to hear with your own organization, right? And they basically told him that by not giving him a 5-year max contract. They gave it to Rubio instead. He wasn't an A guy either. But they offended Kevin Love by telling him, yeah, we're not going to give you the 5-year max contract. Sorry, guy. You're not that guy. And they handled it poorly. But then he goes over to Cleveland, and he's the clear-cut third guy in the equation, and he's still doing Kevin Love things, and he's amazing, but he's an enhancement now of the best players. If Cat can be an enhancement of Anthony Edwards, this thing could skyrocket. But we'll have to see how and when that plays out later on this season.
And I think the important thing to keep in mind too now, though, is this. Ant is your best player. So, like, this isn't just arbitrarily Ant's team because Ant's more fun. Ant is your best player. Carl has special skills, but when you can do, I think what takes Ant from a place of he's damn good, but Carl is still the best player to know Ant is this. The emergence of point Ant. So, like, when Ant previously, he didn't run the floor, but he does now a lot of times, and he's really damn good. Like he's effective. So I think when you have a guy that can do as much as Ant does, and like now, I love the fact he goes to the basket a ton now. Like he cuts in there, and it felt like that was among the steps that Wiggy never took. Was that right? Like in fact, his first year he went to the basket and then he stopped. So I think Ant does so many things so well now that when Carl does come back, it's very safe to say, hey, Carl, you're still great. You can contribute a lot and we can be good, but our best player is Ant. Like that's a fact I think everybody with this franchise now has to accept, and the franchise will be better if they do.
Yeah. You might say Anthony Edwards has really sharpened his skills over the past 30 days or so, much like I and my wife have sharpened our kitchen knives through our friends, an amazing new service called Vivrant, online knife sharpening service, a Minnesota-based company. They actually have a great store in Wayzata that I know Dex is going to stop out today. Joseph and his team are very knowledgeable, very passionate. It's not just about sharpening, too. They have Japanese knives you can check out, skills classes as well. So my wife and I are making it a big goal to just be adults in 2023, which is, cooking our own meals, revolutionary, trying new recipes, eating healthier. And for us, the freshly sharpened knives help us enjoy our time preparing food. If you've never had your knives sharpened, and obviously most of America has knives, but very few of you have ever actually thought about getting them sharpened. This is a super easy process. They mail you a kit. It's a very safe, mailman-friendly kit. You put your knives in it. You send them back. They'll even send you replacement knives with the kit if you want to. And it's like a 4-day process or something. That's what it took for me. And the knives came back amazing. ScoreNorth.com, keyword sharp, or Vivrant.com, Vivront.com. First 100 Score listeners to use the promo code SCORE, SKOR, receive a free vegetable peeler with your order. And every order from Vivrant supports paying off school lunch account balances in our local Minnesota schools. So it's for a great cause. Maya Mackey is very excited outside the studio.
She loves the Wolves.
Too.
Everybody knows she loves the Wolves.
Oh, loves the Wolves. She's howling over the Wolves. All right, my next statement for you guys is D'Angelo Russell is playing the best basketball of his career. And the timing is interesting because he is a free agent after the year is over. The trade deadline is coming up in 9 days? February, whatever it is. Less than 2 weeks. And they have to figure out, do you just ride this out with him because he's been one of your hottest, best players?
She said
do
yes.
You?
Yeah.
Yes.
I said yes, ride it out.
Do you trade him and get some value in case he walks somewhere else? Because at this point, they've shown no indications of giving him a contract extension. However, the last 27 games, he's averaging 21 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, shooting 44% from three-point range, you guys. So this is a good problem to have. It either boosts his value for a trade or it's just helping you win a bunch of games that maybe you wouldn't. So we're seeing the best basketball, I think, of D'Angelo Russell's career the last 30 games or so.
Deadline is February 9th. So a week from Thursday. So what do you do, Phil, to go back to you? Do you play it out? Do you shop him now, which they probably don't want to do because he's playing
Boy.
well? But just to be clear, from my standpoint, I don't sign him to an extension because I don't trust him. Like, I think that this is very much what guys like D'Lo have the ability to do when they are motivated by the potential for a contract.
Yeah, I think it's tough because I don't necessarily think that he's going to take a discount, but you already have two guys that combined make like the next few years between Rudy and Cat like 40 or 50. They make like 85 or 90 million combined at some point in a couple of years from now. Anthony Edwards is going to be up for a contract extension. Jaden McDaniels, like those are guys you're building around for the future.
Right.
You have very little cap flexibility, but you do have a gap between like the salary cap and the luxury tax. You can re-sign your own guys and go over the cap. So they could re-sign D'Lo if they wanted to, but a re-signed D'Lo plus Gobert plus Cat plus Ant in a couple of years and Jaden and all the other players you have to fill out on your roster, you're going to go well into the luxury tax. And I don't know what the appetite is of A-Rod and Mark Lowry to do that the next couple of years.
Yep.
And Glenn Taylor, in the next 12 months or so. So I guess what I would do is he's been such an integral part of winning games for you. He's doing this in part because it's a contract year and he knows this is like the last big contract he's probably going to sign. Like this is the contract for him that gets him into his 30s and stuff. I would if I didn't get a great offer, something of value that helped me continue forward, I would probably just ride him out and cross my fingers that you could pull a sign and trade deal with him, because that's the other thing that could happen. The team that he chooses in free agency might have cap troubles, and then both him and that team would need the Wolves to facilitate a sign and trade. So it's a gamble, but I don't know what's out there. The only trade that we've seen is like a Kyle Lowry swap, but then you'd be taking another year of his crappy contract, and he's not very good.
Right.
So I don't know. If I knew what was out there, I'd be able to say like, oh, yeah, take that or don't. But at this point, he's been one of your best players for the last 2 months. It's tough.
Well, and Ant helps him a ton, I think, too, because one, he takes pressure off. Two, D'Lo's not really truly playing point guard
I mean,
much of the time, but much of the time he can be off the ball and shoot, which I think helps him a ton. I think the expectation that he and Gobert were going to work really well was probably a bit flawed. I think D'Lo needs to be able to play his own game. And I don't know if that did not fit in for quite some time as the Wolves tried to find themselves and get chemistry. But now I think with Ant playing so well, and the weird thing about Ant that makes him to me so special is this: for as good as that dude is, he can be super unselfish. Like he wants his teammates to succeed.
Well, the thing about D'Lo too, like this is going to get real X's and O's on you, and I'm not the foremost like X's and O's basketball guy, just an idiot with a microphone. But on the pick and roll, so Rudy is a pick and roll lob guy, right? Or just like get near the basket. He's not going to pop. He's not like Karl Anthony Towns could pick. He could roll on the pick and roll. He could pop, shoot a three. Gobert, it's like you need to get head of steam rolling downhill, get him a lob, get him a pass up high in traffic. D'Lo's style on the pick and roll is not to crash the hoop as much. It's to probe. So he'll go around a screen. He's not like a freight train going downhill like Anthony Edwards or somebody else where you can suck defenders in and maybe throw a lob or a pass or whatever, bounce pass.
Right.
So what you've seen sometimes with D'Lo is the hockey assist on these pick and rolls where he'll do his probing thing while Rudy rolls to the basket, and then he'll throw like a secondary pass to the baseline to Kyle Anderson or somebody, and then Anderson throws the lob or gets to Rudy under the hoop. So it's not the perfect like D'Lo crashing the hoop and getting a lob to Gobert, Kobe and Shaq or Kobe and Gasol or LeBron James and whoever. So I don't know, but it's working a lot better the last couple months than it did in November and December for sure. So, okay. All right, any other Wolf stuff from you guys?
I got one more.
Okay.
It's prove it time. So you right now are on a 6-game homestand. You've won your first 2. Tonight you've got the second of consecutive home games against the Kings, Warriors on Wednesday, Magic on Friday, and then Denver early next week. Okay. This is going to sound really, really weird, but the game perhaps that I am the most curious about is the Magic game. And here's why. The Magic stink.
They don't stink.
And this team, well,
That's not true.
Well, they're not great. They're not great.
They're very feisty. They're very
okay.
feisty.
But the fact is,
They're not the Pistons.
The Wolves should beat the Magic. And the Wolves have struggled so much with bad teams or sub 500 teams, if you would prefer to use that. And the Wolves' inconsistency has been the maddening thing. How many times have we thought, okay, they're on a bit of a hot streak now. Now it's going to click. Now it's going to gel. And they hit a bump, a speed bump, or a couple of them. So I think that this homestand and the conclusion, the last 4 games of it, give this team a real opportunity to snap out of that up and down sort of back and forth roller coaster ride and show us that they are now on the right track and can bring the game that they brought Friday against Memphis on a far more consistent basis, because that game was impressive. I don't think they trailed. They played really, really well. That was the type of game. That was a mature basketball game played by a team that knew exactly what it was doing.
I just want to highlight the Magic for a second, because I know it's easy to just like none of us watch Magic games, but because then they started 5-20 this season, but that is not in the same category as like the Rockets or the Pistons. The Magic are 14-11 after their 5-20 start, with 3 wins over the Celtics during that stretch. They beat the Pelicans, and they won a game in Portland like 2 weeks ago as well. So they've beat, like, to beat Boston 3 times over that stretch. They are a legitimate threat to be feisty.
But you should beat them at home.
I agree.
That's the type of team that you should beat, because I have no doubt that the Wolves are going to get up for the Kings, Golden State for sure, just because it's Golden State.
Yep.
And Denver, you should. So, like, the Magic is the type of Friday night home game that I want to see you win, because those are, like, the Wolves are not supposed to be this, oh, they've lost again. And that's how it sort of felt. I want to see more consistency.
I agree with that. Yep. The Warriors seem to always just kind of like clown the Wolves too. You know, they just, not always, but when they're engaged, it seems like the Warriors are just kind of like, oh, you guys are a bunch of young, immature idiots running around. So can you punch back at the Warriors too? Is that a home game against the Warriors?
Yep.
The Warriors have been atrocious on the road this year. It's kind of a weird deal. I don't know, after like 6 or 7 years of a dynasty, you're probably just kind of bored in December, January, and February. Just try and get your way to the playoffs any way you can. They're no longer interested in winning 65 games in the regular season and playing everyone for 40 minutes. They don't need to do that